Hi there, everybody. It's Michele Denman. Wanted to share with you today. I have been so prayerful and researching a lot of research. I'm going to share with you some things that God has been highlighting and things I wanted to share with you. And I believe that these are things that actually are going to very much help you. And in this hour that we live in the world, we are needing so much discernment. We really need wisdom to navigate the days we live in. If I look at what I've gone through and the things that I've experienced in my life, I was thinking about this. I think of all of the things, and if I could share with myself before I learned, if I could be the person that would go back and teach my younger self and say, if I could do this differently. There's so much that I've had to learn and research and learn after, finding out the hard way. And it's really when you are a kind person or a loving person or a compassionate or just a kind heart or things like that. We're seeing this happen on huge display with the case of Johnny Depp. Here's a kind soul, a good empathic person who helps with charities and goes and loves on children and loves on the elderly. And you see just countless times where he did this very quietly. He never did it for public spectacle, but a kind-hearted person who's extremely generous, who took care of his mother who was abusive to him and then took care of her in her elderly years and moved her, bought her homes and moved her to LA and, had full-time nursing for her. And this is not something that he's ever bragging about. It's just such a good, kind-hearted soul. How could somebody such as this, this is what the injustice, the injustice is. And we, collectively, the world sees it, people are pretty smart. And I've been hopeful, so hopeful to see people awake and aware and, seeing through this whole thing going on. And so just given in my own life, what I've had to go through with hard people, one of the things that God has helped me with lately, and I've had to, for some reason, been led to study and research and, see it pointed out in the Bible, but then also see, in the day and hour that we're living in, there's just an epidemic right now. And what it is the wisdom to discern when you have to deal with people that are not easy to deal with, and we don't fight flesh and blood, but at the same time, there are some signs. And one of the things Johnny said is he wished he would have paid attention to the signs. There were red flags. And he realizes now he was a target, obviously, because he's so famous that, he, attracted, and the abuse from his childhood as well, that he, brought in this woman. But what I wanted to share here is what God has been showing me and highlighting to me about how to have that wisdom. And then what it really is, again, it always goes back to the children, to be an advocate for these children, that perhaps, schools and teachings and trainings where children could be taught earlier. I mean, I wish I had, I wasn't taught and as a young person, and, that teachings and trainings and especially young people, that they're taught earlier to learn these things, because we're in a time right now that's so different. It's a time today in 2022 that's very different than even 1980, or, in terms of what's happening. And we're seeing now a massive, in the mainstream of people talking about narcissism and people having been abused by narcissists and, personality disorders and all this stuff. And so one of the things that has happened recently, especially with the case with Johnny Depp, it's all, being highlighted now. And it can be very, this can be a masterclass, really. This could be a masterclass to learn from and to, pay attention. And when you get that kind of hunch, that gut feeling, which is really the Holy Spirit warning you, and you kind of go, oh, something about this doesn't feel right, or, you get a discernment. this is, I mean, if I could look back in my life, and I think every time that feeling, if ever I ignored that, oh boy, I see now, if I could do it again, I would have trusted that sign that I was given back then to have wisdom. And what happens when you're being gaslit is a term that's being used, all over with narcissism. And gaslighting is when someone is like, there's literally like a projection, and because of their insecurity and their dysfunction, they consciously or unconsciously, a lot of people think they know they're doing it. Some people probably don't know they're doing it, but there's a gaslighting where it's like, it's from that movie Gaslight. I think the movie's called Gaslit or Gaslighting. I'm not sure the name of the movie's from the 40s, but where the man is trying, so he's actually, raising the gas in the house, and his wife is saying, oh, I noticed this. And he's like, that's not happening. Like he's totally evading her reality when she's saying, this is what's happening. And he's saying, no, it's not. And so it's a way to deny somebody's reality. You're literally denying their reality. And so when you go through these things, the reason I'm bringing this up is when you go through these things, and it's because it is happening from an evil demonic realm, you're really getting this from evil spirits. And that's all connected in somebody's, projection, if you will, that they're projecting out, is that you will, be having your reality denied. And so then you're like, well, wasn't I like, you're kind of going, well, didn't I think that? And well, maybe I was wrong. And so this is what gaslighting does. And so that's what's been happening. And we're hearing a lot about it in circles talking about narcissism, things like that. You don't hear as much people talking about the spiritual behind all of this. It's more in the psychological realm we're hearing, but there is Jezebel, and we're dealing with a whole spiritual, the whole thing in the spirit realm is behind all of this. And so one of the things I wanted to share with you, because we are all learning, it's something that God is behind right now, and we're all learning about these things. The reason I wanted to share is because this could actually help when you're dealing, having to deal with people, having to deal with difficult people at work or family or friends or church, or because it's everywhere. You can't find it's all over the place. It's in church too. So one of the things God said to me as I've been really researching and watching the whole thing going on in the Johnny Depp trial, because he's really the true victim actually in this. He's actually the victim in this whole thing. As the Lord said to me, there's a book called The People of the Lie. And The People of the Lie is written by Scott Peck. And it was written a while ago, this book, but it basically was talking about a psychologist's experience when he was dealing with certain people. These people refuse to repent. They refuse to own up to their stuff. They refuse to even acknowledge their issues. And he calls them the people of the lie. And what they will tend to do, which is what we're seeing happening in this dynamic of, what happened to Johnny Depp, is that they will blame. They blame. It's never them. They're perfect. They're the wonderful one. And they never take responsibility, and they project and they blame on the other person. And what happened was, and I think this is absolutely fascinating, is what happened in this situation when one of Johnny's star attorneys, Camille, she's amazing. Like, I love Camille. Everybody loves Camille. And, when she got up and she was like, in cross-examination, she's saying to his ex-wife, she's saying, you're the abuser here. And this person, what happens, and this is what we're dealing with in the spirit realm as well, to help you, to know that this is from the spirit realm as well. When you're dealing with somebody with that spirit, Jezebel, that is in Johnny's ex, is that once they're kind of found out, and especially when the one being abused is saying no more, like I'm out of here, no more, that what happens with that person and that spirit is they will lie. And they will eventually, when they've been found out, and they will lie and shift the narrative, lie about the story, make things up. And it's all to shift, to take the focus. See, the whole point of this whole entire thing is that it's to take the focus off of her, and she wants to put it back on him. And that's the absolute abuse. In fact, something that was spoken of by Camille, which was brilliant. Camille said something I'll never forget. She said I don't even want to say her name, which is why I'm saying ex-wife, because I don't even want to give her the acknowledgement of her name. That's why I'm saying ex-wife. But his ex-wife, Camille, says, and you continue to abuse him in the media. You continue to abuse him by writing this thing she wrote about him. And I thought, wow, that is it. She continued to abuse because she lost control. She had lost the control because their whole thing was domination. Her whole thing was to use him, and she lost control. So therefore, because Johnny got away from her, finally, thank God, he left her and got away, then she wanted to spin it and change the narrative. And then Camille says, you continued to abuse him. I was like, whoa, that's it. That's it. That was brilliant. The reason why I'm sharing all this, and back again to Scott Peck's book and the people of the lie, is there are people, and you can call them, I mean, she's been called sociopathic as well. There's a book called Psychopath Free, which is very helpful, because good people have a very hard time, because you're good. When you're good, you have just an inherent goodness. So you can't even imagine, because you're like, you only think with a good heart. You only think with goodness. So you're not even thinking that people, it's like your mind doesn't even, because you're in goodness, and that's like Johnny. He's like a good soul, a generous person. He's not like, he's become famous and all by his own and his talent and not be, he's just a good guy. So the interesting thing with this, with the people of the lie, as Scott Peck talked about, is there are just these people. And, again, we're not fighting flesh and blood, but there are just these people that they will continue to project and never take ownership. And what happens when you're a good person is that you'll sit there and say, well, is it me? Like, maybe I'm the one, maybe it's me, maybe I'm the bad one, maybe they're right. And, you sit there and it takes your energy. It's just literally like a thievery. A thievery is what it is. It's stealing from you. And the sad and the hardest part about this is when you find this, you can find this in church. You can find this in dealing with churches and cults. And that's a whole nother story, but that's a whole nother thing, is because you think, well, these are Christians, so why would a Christian have, but I'm telling you, it's in churches and it's everywhere. So the learning in this is, a masterclass in understanding what Scott Peck talks about in the people of the lie. Like, how do we discern this? How do we, because, the other thing the Bible talks about, it's in 2 Timothy 3:1-5, talking about in the last days, people will be abusive. But it goes on into verse 6, where it says, these are the kinds that worm their way in to weak-willed women. But it's not, I don't think it's just women. I think they also work their way into men. But these are the kind that worm their way into weak-willed women. They worm their way in. So woven sheep's clothing, or whatever you want to call it, but they worm their way in. So this thing, especially, it's not just women, but men too get abused. To learn and to have that in your armor, that I need to have wisdom in this hour. Wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove, as Jesus says, wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove. So I wanted to share with you, I have been in deep research, and I wanted to share with you my very specific notes, because I think this is going to help you. And it's one of the things that what that's really being highlighted specifically with the Johnny Depp case is borderline personality. Now, the ex-wife has been diagnosed with borderline and histrionic personality disorder. There's two different personality disorders that a very credible Dr. Shannon Curry, very credible witness. I found her very, very good, really easy to understand. I mean, she took something really complicated and she's wonderful. So I took notes about her because I wanted to share this with you, because one of the things is it may help you in the future or even now. And once you hear it, you're like, oh yeah, I know people like that, or there's someone in my family, or, things like that. So I'm going to share with you the notes that I took, because I think it can be very helpful in being able to point out or to spot this, because it's actually more common than people think. And it's called borderline personality. And that's what Johnny Depp's ex-wife, that's what Dr. Shannon diagnosed her with through very deep analysis. It's not like just sitting and talking, but they actually have to go through this. There's a testing they go through. It's called an MMPI-2. There's actual testing that they take these people through and questions. So one of the things I want to share with you from my notes is that, so when we're talking about, it's a personality disorder, whenever there's a personality disorder, it's a dysfunction. So it's a dysfunction from normal personality, right? So there's disturbances in several areas. And you know what's interesting? I have my notes in so many different spots. I'm trying to think if I should maybe go to this one. I've written it. I've taken so many notes on this because it's so good, but I'm thinking I want to go with this one because I watched it more than once to really learn. And this one I think is better right here. So, okay. So what it pinpoints to, the personality disorder, is emotionally unstable. So that's kind of an instability of emotions. So number one, there's an intense fear of abandonment. It'll go to extreme measures to avoid abandonment, like complete extreme measures. So in the case with Johnny, what would happen is the intense fear of abandonment was so strong by his ex that she would actually hit him so he wouldn't leave. So she was using violence because she's actually the abuser. She would use violence and hit him so that he wouldn't leave her. So it's that much of an intense fear, when it's actually the opposite, because the person is so afraid of abandonment, but they wear everybody out. Number two, they will either idealize someone or devalue them. So they go from idealizing the person as on a pedestal to then devaluing the person, which is like a splitting. So they have like a splitting where they will split very quickly. 1 minute you're the greatest person in the world, the next minute you're the worst person in the world. There's no middle ground. Number three, a rapid change in self-identity. So there's a lot of mood swings. They often will be a lot of addictions, like whether it's shopping, drugs, there can be all kinds of things. Rapid mood swings and rapid change in self-identity. The reason why the rapid change of self-identity is because they're very unstable in their identity, don't really know who they are. So one of the things we've seen with Johnny's ex is she sort of copying like the way he dresses. And initially when he met her, she pretended to love all of his music and all of his books and kind of like studied him, which is scary kind of when you think about it, studied him to find out what he likes, and then kind of just mirrored his identity and like pretended she was into the same stuff, and pretended that she liked the same books and music. And so he's thinking, my goodness, this person is me, but that's because they don't know who they are. She even mirrored his fashion. We started dressing, wearing hats. If you notice, he would always wear hats, she'd wear hats, dressing the same clothing. So that's, again, unstable identity, not knowing truly who they are. And Dr. Shannon was saying they have chronic feelings of emptiness. So there's often a lot of drug use, a lot of needing of either it's prescription medications or other kind of drugs, because of that feeling of emptiness, to try to cover those feelings up. And the other thing that she diagnosed her with is histrionic personality disorder, which is different. That first one I was talking about is borderline. The second one is the histrionic personality disorder. And then that one is marked by someone seeking approval. There's a very strong ego or pride in this person, unwilling to be wrong. There's a seductiveness. They will crave attention. And they will often blame people for their own failures. They're very reactive, overly dramatic presentation by the person, very flowery language. There's a flip between one moment I'm a princess and I'm a victim. Dr. Shannon said that, again, and Dr. Shannon was, talking a lot, and I just kind of followed in my notes here. Then she flipped over to the borderline, and she talked about the borderline. This is now going in the borderline. I was just talking about histrionic previously. The borderline is very destructive, very dramatic, very erratic. There's that fear of being abandoned. So they're very unpredictable. They are not able to regulate emotions. So there's a very deep anger, actually, and they're not able to regulate. They have no self-control. So again, when the Bible talks about 2 Timothy 3:1, in the last days, people will be abusive, they will be brutal, they will be ungrateful, inability to have self-control. This is exactly, here it is. We're seeing the Bible in full stream here. So they have little access, they cannot self-regulate. There's a lot of suppressed anger, very unstable mood, and there's major cruelty towards less powerful people. And this you could see, like, how does somebody treat the wait staff? How do people treat, like, the people that are at the doorman, or things like that? But a very strong cruelty. And I believe it's, not just cruelty, it's cruelty in general. It's not just less powerful people, but there's just a cruelty in general. And they're very concerned with their image. So how they look, and how people perceive them, that's also very, 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 very important to them. Again, they'll idealize someone 1 minute and then devalue them the next. That's the splitting. That's very prominent with a borderline. You're either amazing and someone to be, worshiped like an idol, or you are a dumpster. So you're like, either like you're the best of everything or you're nothing. That's the extreme that a borderline will actually perceive people in, and it will flip. They're the biggest thing is emotionally unstable. So there's a huge lack of identity, core identity. And so emotionally, there's no stability there. Now, one of the things that she talked about, because Dr. Curry was saying that the ex-wife wanted to really much say she had PTSD, but PTSD is a trauma from something that's been life-threatening. Okay, so PTSD. So Dr. Curry had to figure out, does she really have these core personality disorders, which have been with her probably since childhood, or maybe, there's the whole nurture genetic thing, or it could be in the genetics, could be also her nurturing, or, being brought up, how she was brought up as a child. But so Dr. Curry had to discern, is this actually PTSD, or are there actually personality disorders? And what Dr. Curry found is that she wasn't because the ex-wife was trying to say that, well, I'm having trauma because of Johnny's abuse and all this kind of stuff. But Dr. Curry found that no, she actually had depression, anxiety when she first went to Los Angeles. She was already suffering earlier in her life, way before Johnny. So Dr. Curry goes into then this kind of, disorder of the personality. And she talks more about the histrionic here. And she says there's overly dramatic speech, expressionistic speech, will quickly shift with emotions. Like one moment the person's really high, the next moment they're really angry, the next moment they're sad, so the emotions shift around. And there's a shallowness, that's why she's not really believable, because there's a shallowness to it. It doesn't seem authentic. Everyone has really discerned the emotion doesn't seem to be very deep, like there's a shallowness in it, and almost seems like acting, and that quick shifting of emotion. And then Dr. Curry said that she used the MMPI-2 test, which is very, very, very intensive with questions, and did this as part of her analysis. What she found is that you have to test. So you're testing for the truth, really, with this person, the truthfulness in this person. And what she found was, number one, that this person was very much minimizing their personal problems. Like, no, I'm perfect and there's nothing wrong with me. And, kind of acting like they're perfect and the savior. And number two, externalization of blame. So It's always somebody else, never my problem. It's always somebody else's issue. Number 3, there's an inner hostility that is attempted to be controlled. So there's a very deep rage. There's a lot of hostility, a lot of anger is in there. And they are very self-righteous. And this is what Dr. Curry found when she was analyzing his ex. Very self-righteous, judge others, but deny that, acting, so self-righteous, but we're denying that they're actually acting that way. Again, Dr. Curry said full of rage and anger. They would act very non-judgmental, but there actually is very deep anger in there. Number 6, very passive aggressive. Number 7, very self-centered, all about the self, very self-indulgent. Number 8, manipulative, and then would use manipulation to get their needs met. Number 9, very needy of attention, acceptance, and approval, needing that. Anger would come out, again, no self-control. Anger would just explode out without being able to control it. Number 10, would distance people, would act very sophisticated and act fair and balanced, but actually the person would act like they were so fair about others, but they were actually very judgmental of others. And she pointed out that there are different codes. So when you're dealing with these different types, she called it a 3-6 code. And she said markedly with this one is anger, cruelty with people who are less powerful than they are, kind of a holier than thou, sort of superior, I'm better, you're beneath me, people that are less powerful, very concerned with their image, very attention seeking, very prone to, again, pushing the blame. Nothing's ever wrong with them. It's always everybody else. And then there's suppressed and denied anger. And there's a disorder of stability. So very unstable, in functioning. Some can function high, but, it's disguised. They're maybe using a lot of drugs or they're on a lot of medications usually, or things to try to even continue functioning. Instability in relationships, in emotions, in behavior, instability in sense of self and identity. There's an underlying terror of abandonment. It's actually terrifying. Now, this is very interesting that Dr. Curry said this, because the terror was when they actually played audio where Johnny's talking with her, and her whole thing is like, don't leave me, don't leave me, don't leave me. Like, she's like, you always leave, you don't stay with me. And so she would actually, this is what's really, really distorted, is she actually would use violence. So she'd hit him and she would use the violence. And this was a way to keep him from leaving. And so Johnny was always what Johnny said when he was a little boy, he would run to the bathroom and he'd hide when his mother was hurting him physically or verbally, he would go and hide. So this same thing, which is so sad, this same thing as Johnny would try to get away. So he'd run into the bathroom, and this same thing happening with her. And he was not abusing her. He was actually trying to get away from the abuse, which is horrendous. And, it's actually you can hear it on audio where she's saying, I wasn't hitting you, or I wasn't punching you. I was hitting you. I wasn't punching you. I was hitting you. It was like, and then he was saying, Amber, like, don't you understand? Like, do you actually, like, there were things she was saying, and he says to her, do you actually believe this? Like, do you actually believe that you're a victim? Like, are you really believing this? Like, he's like, so there's the gaslighting, that's gaslighting. And she's going, I wasn't punching you, I was hitting you, and you're a baby, and you're da-da. So that's what, there's an example of gaslighting right there. Like, no, this is not, you're stupid. And she would speak like, she'd be like, oh, you're such a baby. And, so gaslighting is where someone is like, no, that's not true. That's just so, and Johnny's going, do you actually really believe, So again, there's anger, that explosive anger. They think something's a slight to them. So they are like always like, you've said this, and then they'll explode in anger and rage. Like, you slighted me, you abandoned me. There's a explode in anger. They're often misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder, but bipolar is completely different than this, Dr. Curry said. There are fluctuating moods. There's a hypersensitivity to being slighted or feeling offended. And there's an overwhelming emotion and no way to regulate that emotion. Maybe they'll cry, which, would be reactivity. They can react violently. They're often abusive. Women who implement violence against partner. So they actually find that women that have this, there will be violence against a partner. And this is, again, she was talking specifically in this case, about Dr. Curry was physically assaulting their partner. It doesn't mean it couldn't be a man as well, just saying that for this, we're talking about Dr. Curry here. Idealizing the partner to devaluing the partner, they're either everything or nothing. They will do anything to express that big emotion of anger. Again, hot-headed. They can come across, though, as very charming. This can all be kind of, in the beginning, there's a love bombing stage, which is, again, that goes with narcissism. And some people are also highlighting narcissism here, that, they start out with a love bombing, like, oh, charming and seductive, and they're trying to woo you, basically. They can be very caring as long as their needs are being met. So they can show emotion and intimacy, but as long as it's because it's about them, as long as their needs are being met. If someone isn't meeting their needs, they would see it as harm. Like, you're not, they would see that as harm. So they actually, I think people with this, they actually really believe, like, they actually believe, because if you're not, like, one of the examples given is that Johnny was constantly, which is so draining, constantly, like, can you imagine the energy? Because you're really dealing with a child. It's like dealing with a 2-year-old in a way. And Johnny's constantly, like, having to jump through hoops and whatnot. And, you're dealing with somebody who's really, really like a child here. And because they've never really grown up emotionally. As long as their needs are being met. So that's a child. Very charming initially. Initially, everything will seem great, but everything becomes then very splitting, that black and white. I said this before, idealized to dumpster. No relationships that are long-term. So the relationships don't last very long. And that's actually, we can see this. Most of the people she was friends with at the time, all of this, they're not friends anymore. Even the people when they had all lived in Johnny's penthouses, like, Johnny was so generous that he literally put everyone, he literally gave free penthouses, to her entire family and friends. And that's how generous. This just shows you, it's like, this guy is a wonderful, kind soul. He's putting everybody up for free. And, no relationships that are long-term. So we see that exactly. Instability and identity, don't know who they are. So that is the borderline. They will take on the identity of those around them. So you can see that as well. One of the things as well is when you see someone taking the identity, there's something called actually a communal narcissist and a communal narcissist. Now, borderline, I just want to emphasize here, borderline is not the same. You can be borderline with kind of the narcissistic, that's on a spectrum. But if someone's diagnosed with narcissism, that's different. But there's also something to just overlap here, because people are also, I'm trying to clarify this, because Dr. Shannon never said, she just said borderline, probably to make it more simple than going into the whole, there's so much other stuff when you add on narcissism. But there is a communal narcissist that wants to be like, I'm the one that's doing all the charity, and I'm giving to the poor, and I'm helping everybody, and they want it, but it's on social media and it's posted everywhere. Like, look how wonderful I am and how great I am that I'm saving the world. And so that's sort of what I noticed right away was, although she's, in this situation so abusive, she's wanting to, so again, back to image, like, she's like, I'm, going to free everybody, and I'm here to save the world. And, she was kind of, very much like, look at all the charities I'm giving, and, trying to look like that kind of modern day, we see this sort of image of a modern day celebrity, like, Angelina Jolie, and they're giving, saving the children. That's kind of that, but it's false, really. I'm not here to decide who's false and who's not in terms of that. I'm not trying to say that. I'm just saying oftentimes this image, and it's for PR, and it's not even real, it's not like who they really are behind, like, are they really like this behind the closed doors? Is this who they are, or is it PR? So They'll take on the identity of those around them. It's very uncomfortable to not know who you are. So it's extremely uncomfortable. So you're always looking, to everybody else, like, who am I? They'll initially be in enmeshment with this person. They'll take on the identities of those around them. They don't know who they are in the world. Their hobbies will actually change. So, they like the music of the person they're with. They will change the way they dress, and this is exactly what happened. Like, whatever Johnny liked, and Johnny thought, oh, isn't that sweet? Like, she likes the same music and books. And then, oh no, she's a sociopath. Like, there's even words, Johnny's words, where he's saying, he was love bombed. It's kind of like, initially this person is like perfect because they like my music and they like my books and they like my films, and it was never real. So there's one line that Johnny said that a lot of people, that understand, they were saying, Johnny had said, he said to her, you don't exist. Like, the person I fell in love with, you don't exist. You're not real. Like, you were just an image. You were a configuration in my mind. You aren't real. And that's sad. That is so sad. It's a sad, sad thing. I know exactly. It's so hard because it's not even like a real person. That's so devastating. It's not a real person. Then Dr. Curry went into the histrionic a little bit more. She talked about how there's a cluster, they put these like borderline and histrionic are in a cluster, is how it's diagnosed. So histrionic, dramatic, erratic, emotional, instability. Instability is the mark with borderline, where histrionic is drama and shallowness. And where avoiding abandonment is borderline, histrionic is to be the center of attention. So she's saying that these are both here. So avoiding abandonment would be borderline. Histrionic is always need to be the center of attention. If you don't have the attention on you, you feel empty. You don't have the sense of being of value. So there's no sense of self there, no core self, sense of being of value. So again, those extremes. Again, and she said it's very common that they make up stories. They will often lie. And I know this is a very remarked of someone when they're dealing with, this is narcissism as well, but when you're dealing with, once kind of you've been found out and people are leaving, then this is when they start lying, making up stories. She said, victim or princess, they're seeking the caretaking, like somebody kind of take care of me. But yet one moment they're like the avenger, like, because that's kind of how his ex-wife portrayed, like, she's this big, now she's going to be the voice for all female abuse, everyone that's been abused. Now I'm going to be the voice. That's kind of like being the avenger of injustice. So she kind of painted like, I'm now going to be, the one that saves women, from that's the whole lie that's kind of being perpetrated here. And if people here's the interesting thing with that. People that don't have discernment and people that cannot see would be like, oh, she's Mother Teresa, like, oh, she's like Princess Diana, kind of thing. Like, but everyone, people are like, it doesn't match, if the way that she's made Johnny into be this horrible, thing. People that can go, no, she's not Mother Teresa, but she wants the world to think like, I'm going to now save everyone. So being the avenger of injustice. Again, she says with histrionic, they have a very flowery speech, but nothing is really being said. They'll make up stories to get respect and attention. They often is an attractiveness. They can be very sophisticated, very interested in their looks. Their looks get them attention, very flirtatious, flattering of others. They don't want criticism, so they will flatter people. She says there is a sophistication that can be there. They can be kind of high functioning. And she was saying that when they are diagnosing that only 5 have to be met of the 9 symptoms. So only 5 have to be met. And you can see this is pretty extensive, but it's pretty obvious what's going on here. She says they know how to mimic you. They'll be calculated how they present themselves. They will always minimize their own problems. They'll minimize it and say it in a very sophisticated way. There is deep emotional reactivity in intimate relationships, desire for the partner would meet all of their needs. Again, idealize the person, then devalue them, as I said before. There's anger, deep, deep, deep anger. And she was talking about how someone can have like complex trauma and can be, you know, because they feel unsafe. And she was talking about, she had to really, and this is pretty intense. I mean, this was very, very intense, but looking at, you know, that she didn't see it as PTSD, and that that there aren't, you have to see if there are pre-existing conditions. So to say like, because she's saying, oh, I have trauma because I was abused. That's what she's saying about Johnny. But what deeper dive, Dr. Curry deep dived into this to see, no, there is stuff from childhood here. And there could be pre-existing things like childhood trauma, you know, were these there before, is what Dr. Curry said. And then medications usually do not work. This is not usually the answer. If they use medication, it would be more of a stimulant, like things that are used for ADD or ADHD. And that was actually, she found that there was a drug that Provigil or something. I'm not sure the exact name. It was hard to hear what she was saying. I thought she might have said Provigil or something, but I don't know. I don't know about those prescriptions, but it usually is kind of a stimulant medication rather than the others. And medications usually aren't the answer. They need very deep therapy for their entire lives. Usually, it usually requires like lifelong therapy. And the interesting thing, like the whole time while I was researching and listening, is I literally the Lord kept bringing to my mind again the people of the lie. I kept, you know, the Lord just, that book just kept, and I had purchased that book a long time ago, but it was now that I really found it very, very, very fascinating. And then I kept hearing the people of the lie, to look that up. So I did actually look up that book. And the interesting thing is when Scott Peck is talking about these people that were actually on his couch, because as a psychologist, these people were actually on his couch, and he found there were people he could not help. Now, that's a very interesting thing that he says that, because when you hear about this rampant thing going on with narcissism in the world right now, and many psychologists that speak out, and there are so many now online, and they all say that there's no cure. They all say that they can't really help, like they really don't find that they can actually cure somebody. Now, I thought it was interesting because when you hear psychologists talk, they're not necessarily talking about the spirit world, because there's a whole nother piece with that of a person probably needing deliverance. Most 100% of the time, you know, these people are going to need deliverance. And when you're looking at, there's a spirit realm that behind this, this is really, it's multifaceted, but the person mostly is going to need deliverance. And there are countless studies and research, and Scott Peck even begins then to address, which is very interesting, about he begins to address the spirit. And this was, again, he was way ahead of his time. This was quite a while ago that he wrote this, but even now there's just so much more going on. You know, people are understanding about the need for deliverance. So definitely, you know, in this situation for sure, I have absolutely no doubt that there's Jezebel, and many, it's not just Jezebel. I have actually, Jezebel's the big one, but there's more. I've been researching, and also just by, you know, seeing into the spirit, there's way more than that, than Jezebel. But that is probably the main piece with narcissism. And I would say that again, that Dr. Curry is pointing out borderline, but you can definitely see that there's that with the borderline. You can see the narcissism. There's just something different, but you can see the narcissism as well. So I wanted to share this. And again, the reason why is because, again, I I've spent so much time learning from the Lord, and then researching and reading. And I have spent so much time to learn, because it literally, through everything I had to go through personally, I had to learn, because I had started to discern and not really understand, because I sensed it in church, and I sensed it in people. And I started, I didn't understand what was happening really. And then I started to, as I went through all this stuff, I started researching. I'm like, this is exactly, I kept meeting the same type of person. It wasn't just a male I would meet, but I would meet females. I met a lot of males with it, but I met females as well. And, when you have kind of an empathic or soft heart or compassion, you're going to see the good. You see it with eyes of love, really, which is why Jesus says, be wise as a serpent, but harmless as a dove, because you'll see it with those, with an eyes of purity, really, of loving, seeing the best in people kind of thing. And I think that's what happened with Johnny as well, just, being a good soul that he is, a kind, empathic soul. And the reason, again, I want to share is that we learn. We need that wisdom training. We need it in this hour, because it's not just this situation, it's actually everywhere. I can't even tell you how many, if it wasn't at a certain place, I'd meet somebody, or at a church, or at the grocery store, wherever, and you begin to then see. And the biggest way to discern, and this is one of the things I had to learn, it was to not listen to what the person was saying, because they'd be saying one thing like, oh, I love you, or this or that, and it's all good. But it was how I felt, or, felt in the spirit, but also just how did I feel? Even if the person was saying that they cared about me, you can't go by the words. You can't go by what they say, because that's the whole thing, especially with this thing being exposed right now. Words, just because somebody says certain words doesn't mean it's the truth. And this whole case is highlighting these personality disorders. It's highlighting that there are, as the Bible warned, people would be abusive and ungrateful and lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God, and brutal. It says brutal is one of the words the Bible says, brutal. And there's a huge thing with this. And the more we learn and can know and discern and understand and study and research ourselves, the Bible says, study to show yourself approved. We do need to learn, and it's good to, growth is good, and keep our brains functioning, and learning about new things. And there's a so much now, so much you can learn about this. And so one of the things with this whole situation, with this being brought, literally brought to light now with the Johnny Depp case, it's literally like a spotlight, if you will. It really is a spotlight. And it's going to be, the whole goal is healing. Bottom line, it's not just so we sit here and suffer, but the whole goal is healing. So healing the trauma, truth coming out, and then knowing, because sometimes you don't know what, the reason why the truth is so important is it's kind of like a misdiagnosis in a way. It's like, if you don't know what it'd be like trying to heal cancer when actually you have an issue with your heart. It'd be like, wait, no, we're dealing with the wrong thing. So there's been a lot of misdiagnosis going on in a way. And it's because this stuff is deep. And it has layers to it. It's not simple. But to be able to learn, and, how can we heal then, and heal ourselves ultimately, because it's ultimately about healing ourselves, and then being able to help others. After you've healed yourself, you have a journey that you did with yourself, and then you're able to help others because you went through it. And again, there's another aspect to this, as to why this is so big. Okay. The other aspect to this is that when we all deal with our hurt, our pain, our trauma, when we have dealt with that trauma, then we can no longer be fooled by what is again happening with the level of tyranny and lies about the that's going on with the media, with what's happening with our health, what's happening with the economy, with all of this. Because when you have dealt, when you are healed and whole, and you know who you are in God, and you have your identity solid, you'll be like, that's a lie, that's a lie, that's not true. You know, because you've gone through stuff. And so that way, when we heal trauma, then tyranny will fall apart, which the tyranny of what literally is, I mean, it's massive. The totalitarian thing happened, you know, it's like massive. And we, you know, I'm finding that the people, you know, when you look at in the Bible, when the people were being freed, the Israelites were being freed, it was like only 10% like left. Why only 10%? Why, what about the other 90%? You know, because people are so used to being dumbed down and slaves, you know. And so this whole thing is, again, for the children. Bottom line, we're always bringing it back to the children because this is for the children. But freedom for the people, freedom to live, freedom to not have our food, you know, our food supply stolen, freedom to function in a healthy economy and be able to thrive and be able to bring miracles and help others and have a full life and help other people do the same. Freedom to live and thrive without sickness and all the things that God died for, which is the Garden of Eden, the original intent of God, the original design, which is love and goodness, you know, on this earth, which is God's, you know, heaven on earth, if you will. So all of this is, so if we heal then abuse and we heal this trauma, then we are saving the generations, you know, to come, that we are that way. It's a gift of what we do inside internally. You know, we help the other generations because it's again, I was talking before, it was in the last video, but I was talking about when we shift over to the light and when there's this kind of movement over to light, then you know, things move into favor. They move into the favor of God and they move into the blessings and the miracle realm, if you will. It's like the glory realm. And so that's why, you know, God is so wise beyond what we can even, I mean, this is so much bigger. And God is we're in a massive deliverance. And we have to really begin to see everything through this freedom movement. You know, it's really about freedom. You know, the son sets free is free indeed. He died to set the captives free. So it's about freedom, bottom line. And this whole thing is he has to expose. So God is exposing what has been hidden, bringing it to light, exposing it so that, you know, we have freedom, but it's really for the future. It's for the future generations, the children then have freedom. And we are really of service here. We're of service. We're here to serve and to be that light. It's really what this is about. Bottom line is to be that light. And we're of service in that respect. So again, it's a lot. There's so much going on. I wanted to share that bit though, because I found that just, you know, it's really, you know, it's really incredible, you know, that what we now kind of understand. And it's just the beginning really, because these things are now highlighting, but this is the sign of a need that the church, you know, with Jesus cast out demons everywhere he went. You know, he healed the sick, he cast out demons. I mean, this is a sign right now of that the church has to bring back, you know, the original, like we think of like the early church. And Jesus is that sign of, he was healing the sick. And so this is a moment right now, the beginning to see that people aren't free, even if they're saved, even if they're a Christian. There's a whole huge dialogue with that. People, there's a big misnomer around that. Like people are saying, oh, they can't have a demon, but they're saved, but they can't have a demon. Well, actually, it's pretty interesting. But I had to learn again the hard way as I went to churches and I went into different church settings, and I was like, well, something's off. And it took me again a long time in learning and understanding and beginning to now discern it, and discern those spirits that are behind a lot of, not just the people in the congregation, but a lot of the leaders, there's a spirit behind. It's very sad. And we've seen that also come out, which just recently happened with some leaders falling, that were in big leadership roles in massive mega churches, and seeing those people fall. And there's a reason for it, because we're, again, not being healed. The bottom line is not being healed. Like if somebody's healed and whole, they're not going to go cheating and lying and abusing other people. It's like if you're healed and whole in yourself, you're going to be a pure love vessel for somebody. You're going to be like Jesus, so it's to be Christ-like and to be like Jesus, and people need deliverance. So that's a part of, again, another piece with this, which there's more to come with that. But I just wanted to give at least, because the other reason too, and this is the other reason, is that I saw on one stream alone, just one, there are millions right now, 10 million people were watching this last week of Johnny, watching 10 million. I mean, that was just on one video. So imagine if you took that one and then times it by how many. This was just one certain video. There were 10 million people watching. That's a lot of people. So there's a reason when God says, I'm going to pour out my spirit on all flesh, not everyone is going to know the spirit realm or, know about psychology or things like that. But what's happening here is massive, on a massive scale. It's so connected to it's connected to multiple. I'm just highlighting a certain things here, but this case is massive. So I wanted to share a little bit. I hope it helps you with actually discerning and beginning to learn. Again, it's like Johnny said, if I had noticed the red flags, if I had discerned those red flags, maybe I would have went the other way. So you learn and you grow, and you gain that wisdom by learning about these things. So God bless you. So nice to connect with you today. Take care. Bye-bye.